It was meant to be a day of music, sun and fun. But instead it's turned into a long-winded battle between big industry players and music fans.
Dozens more people have made refund complaints after One News revealed last night the Commerce Commission's investigating the festival promoter behind Juicy Fest and the Timeless Summer Tour.
The promoters are under investigation, the companies are in liquidation, and tens of thousands of fans are out of pocket.
So I think my mum and I paid like $475 for tickets, and BNZ will be of no assistance to get the money back. So now the money's gone.
I've been to concerts that have been cancelled. And you always get a refund, there's no question.
All we want is transparency and communication. If we're not getting our money back, for goodness sake, at least just tell us that so we can move on.
What went wrong?
Ticket Ferry has confirmed to ticket holders it doesn't hold their money. That's contrary to a voluntary code of conduct aimed at protecting consumers.
Kia ora, I'm Davina Zimmer, and today on The Detail, how ticket sales and management should work and why some industry players think government intervention is overdue.
Their reaction to us has been pathetic. They couldn't give a shit, I don't think, to be honest.
That's Brent Eccles, co-owner of Eccles Entertainment. He's also the New Zealand representative of the Frontier Touring Company. Brent's been in the business for 25 years during the entertainment boom.
There are so many more shows happening in New Zealand right across the board, whether it be in the various town halls across New Zealand or whether it be at stadium level or whether it be at the Michael Fowler Centre or the Dunedin Town Hall or the Spark Arena or TSB Bank Arena. All levels of venues, they're very, very busy. That means that an awful lot of people are buying tickets and the overall wealth of the industry, if you like, is phenomenal.
If you've ever purchased a ticket for an event in New Zealand, you'll be familiar with names like Ticketek, Ticketmaster and Event Finder. These are ticketing companies that event organisers use to sell their tickets through. Broadly speaking, Brent says there are two models.
One is a ticketer who holds money, and the other model is a ticketer who just takes the money and passes it back to the promoter. They've sold their services based on the fact that the promoter can get the money. And we hope that if something goes wrong, they are cashed up well enough to be able to refund the money.
Ticketing is a big industry. There are more than 50 companies operating in Aotearoa. But there's a high chance you haven't heard about the likes of Megatix, Drifter or Shoobs because there are a few big players dominating the game.
Ticketmaster pretty much control Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch and Dunedin.
So pretty much the whole country.
I think I'm right there. Ticketek would probably come in a close second, but there's a company called Flickit and it's an entirely different model, but they're pretty big as well. Then Event Finder and iTicket and a whole lot of others there also. But Ticketmaster was the biggest one by far.
Yeah, I mean, they all essentially do the same thing, right? They are a third party that you can sell tickets through.
Yeah.
So how do they kind of set themselves apart when they're competing for different events?
Well, so so what you're saying is if I'm a promoter and a ticketer comes to me and says, "Hey, Brent, I want to look after your ticketing.
Yeah.
What sort of deal can we do?" Well, that can be based on marketing, that they can help you market the shows. They might help you promote the shows as well. They might put a little bit of money into it. There might be some sort of advance to get your business.
Or they'll guarantee that you, as the event organiser, can get the money as soon as people buy tickets, which is risky because that means you could spend that money right away, leaving you and ticket buyers in a sticky situation if the event is cancelled. But there's no law saying organisers have to sell their tickets through any ticket company. So why do events use them? Well, there are a couple of reasons. First is safety, especially if you're a promoter like Brent who opts to use companies that hold the money in a trust until after the event has happened.
I know the money is safe. I know there's a good system in place to sell the tickets. It's not going to break down. I know I can also market to those people who've bought tickets and all kinds of things that I think are an advantage. And yes, you do pay, well, the promoter probably pays a bit and the ticket buyer pays a bit to make sure the system works. And I think it's worth it.
And sometimes organisers don't have a choice. The thing is, many venues have what's called a contracted ticketer, which means that any event happening there has to have tickets sold through that company.
In Dunedin, for example, Dunedin Venues controls the Dunedin Town Hall, it controls Forsyth Bar, and there's a couple of others there that if you want to put on a show in Dunedin, you have to go through Dunedin Venues Ticketer, and that's Ticketmaster. Spark Arena is a good example. You have to use Ticketmaster. No ifs or buts. Has to be Ticketmaster.
Why do they do that?
Why?
Yeah.
Well, why they do that is so they can have a consistency as far as how their venue works and how their seating works. And when each show is different, the venue and the ticketer have to have a good symbiotic relationship. And it's important for the overall picture that everything is going to one place. So it's a surety that you can go to a certain website and you understand how it works. And it's a familiar process to the ticket buyer and to the venue.
Juicy Fest and Timeless Summer as well went with Ticket Ferry. What's your thoughts on that ticket company?
Well, I wouldn't use them. That style of company is not my preferred company. I prefer a company that I believe holds the money in trust and that I don't see the money before the show happens.
What are the chances of people getting their money back?
Well, they've gone into receivership, so I would say it looks pretty grim. I would imagine their preference would have been to repay everybody, and for some reason they haven't been able to. That must be a lack of funds somewhere.
Nobody wins when an event is cancelled, but Brent says the main priority should always be to refund ticket holders. Unfortunately, with current regulations, that's not always happening, and if nothing changes, he thinks it's only a matter of time before it happens again.
And we're trying to get the government to look at the situation and go, you've got to do something about this. This is just crazy. There's so much money involved, millions and millions and millions of dollars that goes through these ticketers. And with show business, becoming so big in New Zealand, they have to protect the consumer. And their reaction to us has been pathetic. They couldn't give a shit, I don't think, to be honest. We've been trying through our various bodies, the Promoters Association, the Events Association, to lobby government to say it should be law. It should be held in trust or very similar, because that protects the consumer, the punter who's buying the ticket. And that's the first person we as promoters want to protect, because that's our lifeblood. The government have pushed back every time or just said, we're not that interested. We don't care too much about it. It's not a real problem for us. Well, I think it is. I think ticketing now, every voter in New Zealand buys a ticket, as far as I'm concerned, and their money should be protected. The government should wake up and go, actually, this is a problem here, because it's going to be millions of dollars just going, and the ticket buyer is being left out in the cold, and none of us want that.
Mm. If there's no law at the moment, what is there to protect ticket buyers?
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot, because it's a gnarly issue, and not every promoter agrees with me about it. So this is what I think as far as a punter is concerned. There are three things you should do. The first thing is the show you're going to buy a ticket for at a venue that you know, a normal venue, number one. Number two, do you know the ticketer? Have you used them before? Then number three, do you know the promoter? Now, if all those things are a tick, I think you're fine to go ahead. If you only two of those you can tick, I think you're probably okay. But if it's only two out of the three, that's dangerous ground.
When it goes right, it's incredible, right? You have this magic night out, but there's so many things that can make it go wrong.
A love for music and entertainment has led Consumer NZ's Chris Schultz into a career that lets him write about these topics for a living. He thinks the cancellation of Juicy Fest and Timeless Summer is just the tip of the iceberg.
You know, the events industry is like a boom and bust kind of industry. In boom times, you see all these shows, all these festivals. Post-COVID, there were so many events. You could go to Pink and Coldplay and Travis Scott and Pearl Jam, and like everyone was touring after lockdown, right? Everyone wanted to go to shows, and all these acts hadn't been on the road for 2 years. And everyone was going because we'd been cooped up at home and we were desperate for live events again. I remember like last summer, I counted up how many festivals there were, and it was staggering. There were more than 100 festival events.
So we're saying summer of 2023 to 2024?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did some math. I worked out you could spend like 60% of the summer at a music festival if you could afford all those tickets and maybe owned a helicopter to travel around them. But like that's how busy it was. And so now we're coming towards the end of that. All of those major acts have toured. They've finished those tours. And we're still in a recession. There's not a lot of money, spare money floating around for things like tickets. People are being pretty picky about what they go to. And so we're just coming out of that now. And that's when you start seeing festivals fall over. You're seeing concerts cancelled because they're not selling enough tickets. If you look around the world, this is happening everywhere in the UK, in Australia as well. Splendour in the Grass has postponed 2 years in a row.
For more than 20 years, Splendour in the Grass has brought some of the biggest names in music to Byron Bay, from Coldplay to Kanye. The 3-day festival often sold out almost instantly, drawing crowds of up to 50,000 people.
Groove in the Mo, another major festival, 2 years in a row. Blues Fest has gone under. That ran for decades, that festival. So I think that's just finally landed in Aotearoa.
But when we're looking at Juicy Fest and Timeless Summer, it doesn't seem like it was the issue of not selling enough tickets.
No, you're right. They have complained that police were unfairly targeting them in liquor licensing. They weren't going to be allowed to sell drinks at some of their events.
In a statement, Juicy Fest Limited said it had to cancel the New Zealand leg of the tour because its liquor licence for the Auckland show was declined. The Auckland District Licensing Committee made that decision based on issues at previous Juicy festivals. It issued a 198-page decision documenting the problems. The Breaking Through podcast summed up these issues.
Preloading, so pre-drinking, was a huge factor. Violence, gangs, inadequate security from Juicy Fest, mismanagement from Juicy Fest, non-compliance to the management plan from Juicy Fest, layout design issues, and ineffective systems.
Chris says without a liquor licence, any festival would struggle to make money.
If you talk to promoters right now, everything's gone up. Shipping, hotels, flights, price rises across the board. These events are getting harder and harder to put on. And if they make any money, it's usually out of alcohol sales. That's where the profit is. And if they're not allowed to sell alcohol, these events can't go ahead. They don't happen. So that sounds like what some of the issue has been for Juicy Fest. The venues that Juicy Fest were going to be in, what are the same venues that Timeless Tour were going to be in. So this restriction affected that tour as well.
Yeah. And now the companies organising these festivals have gone into liquidation and people aren't getting their money back.
Yeah, it's so frustrating, right? Like, I'm not surprised people are upset. It's the biggest liquidation for a festival that I can remember, and it's going to have ripple effects for years. We're probably going to see less festivals next year because of something like this. People will be a little scared, I think, to put these things on.
What can you tell us about the inquiry?
Not a lot, really. I mean, it's all in the hands of liquidators, right? And that is a process that takes a long time to unpack. I've got my own experience with this. I am still getting emails about a failed Bon Iver show in 2020 that was cancelled due to COVID. Then the company behind it went under. And when this happens, as a ticket holder, your name's just added to a long list of unsecured creditors, right? You're basically the last in line to get your money back. There's all the staff, all of the contractors, they're all on this list. And so they have to go through and work out what happened to this money, where it's all gone. And then if there's any left over at the end of that, if you're lucky, you might get your money back. I was fortunate in that instance. I managed to get a charge back through my credit card. That's something you can do. If you used your credit card to pay for concert tickets and that event hasn't happened, I would thoroughly recommend every Juicy Fest and Timeless ticket holder, if you paid for a credit card, approach your credit card company, ask for a charge back. There is a limit in terms of how many days have passed between the cancellation and when you request that refund. But It's something that you can do, and it has been successful, and I'm proof of that. I did it myself. But I'm still getting emails about that show. Like every 6 months I get this massive PDF file from the liquidators. It's got hundreds of names of all of the ticket holders who are still waiting for their money back, and that's been 5 years now. So look, this is a much bigger collapse. We're talking about 4 Juicy Fests, which is probably 40,000 people at a rough guess. Timeless Tour, maybe the same, so up to 80,000 people who are angry and want their money back, and rightly so.
Regulation of ticket sales fall under the Consumer Guarantees Act and the Fair Trading Act. Chris says these both actually work really well, but there are gaps.
Under the Consumer Guarantees Act, you are signing a contract with a promoter, and they have to put this thing on. You're giving them money to put this event on in the future. So you're covered if the date of that festival changes. You're covered if the headliner of a festival drops out. If Drake's coming and then they decide, we can't afford Drake, we're going to put on a lesser-known headliner, you're allowed to ask for your money back. That's the Consumer Guarantees Act. Under the Fair Trading Act, they can't say they've booked Drake and then not have Drake at that festival. That's misleading. So you covered in both those areas. Where those acts don't work is when the promoters go into liquidation. And that's the problem we've got here. That money's disappeared, the company's no longer running, the festivals haven't happened, and there's just this really long process for people to get their money back.
Chris agrees with Brent that a law change that forces ticket companies to hold on to customers' money until after the event has happened would make a big difference.
So I've spoken to the Events Association, I've spoken to the New Zealand Promoters Association. That is the thing that would protect consumers here. If an events company sold a bunch of tickets, that money should ideally be set aside so that if it doesn't happen, it's then returned to ticket holders. Now in Australia, there is a voluntary code, and Ticketmaster and Ticketek, 2 of the biggest ticketing companies, are members of that code. So you've got some faith, right, that if you've bought a ticket through these companies, you'll get it back if it doesn't go ahead. Both of those ticketing agencies, they're the biggest, and they both operate in Aotearoa, so you are safe, I think, if you're buying those tickets. I can only think of one show from memory that refunds weren't issued promptly, and that was around the Foo Fighters show when their drummer died and they cancelled their whole Australian and New Zealand tour. And I think the amount of money was just so huge, they had some issue getting the bank to release it. But that's the only issue with those 2 companies. Now, when you're talking about smaller companies, there's just more risk, right? They're not bringing in as much money. They don't have as much experience. So there needs to be some kind of law where that money's ring-fenced until the event happens, and then it's released to the promoters. So then there's safeguards in place. The other thing that's happening too is there are lists of verified promoters. The New Zealand Promoters Association, NZPA, has a list of vetted promoters and companies, and you can go and check to see if the event you've bought a ticket to or are thinking about buying a ticket to is on that list, which is great. This is something I hadn't even thought about, right? Like, I just thought, you see an act, you buy a ticket because you want to see that act. But I've spoken to Juicy Fest ticket holders who say that from now on, they're going to investigate who's behind these shows. And this is like all new to me. Like, I've written about music for 20 odd years, and promoters were always behind the scenes, quiet. They never wanted to be interviewed. I think the ones that are fronting up and opening up about this are the ones seem to be more trustworthy, and they're on this list, right? Like, that they are just sort of building a name for themselves. They're fronting their own shows, and that's a big change. And I think that's a good change. One incredible thing, and I could not believe this happened this summer, is that Electric Avenue promoters sent out an email to media breaking down all of their costs. And I have never seen this before. They were like, our acts cost $5.5 million. Our hotels and accommodation cost this much. This is how much food and beverages cost. This is how much stages cost. That's the kind of thing that they keep under wraps because it's so competitive. But that's a big change. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, and it sounds great, right? Because then there's that aspect of transparency, because tickets are expensive. You're paying upwards of at least $100 for a festival.
That's a cheap one.
And that's a cheap one.
Yeah.
So it's kind of good to know where your money's going.
Absolutely.
And I think it's especially with events like what's happened with Juicy Fest and Timeless Summer, there is a danger of people becoming sceptical and not wanting to buy tickets. So do you think that transparency is the answer to kind of countering that? I
think it's definitely part of it, yeah. That and some kind of law, whether that's an involuntary code or an actual law that's created to make events companies ring-fence that money so that it can then be given back to ticket holders if it doesn't go ahead. The other thing, I was just doing some investigation in this, in the UK, they've got something called Section 75, which makes credit card companies as liable for those refunds as promoters. So there's just that extra layer of security. But in the meantime, the change takes a long time, especially in this industry. Until that happens, I would thoroughly encourage everyone buying a ticket to just do what this Juicy Fest ticket holder was saying she would do and look at what shows promoters have put on in the past. Are they trustworthy? Is the ticketing company you're buying that ticket from a new company, or has it been around for a while? Have they sold a lot of tickets? All of those things can help give you a guarantee that your money's going to the right place and that event will go ahead.
In a written statement, the Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Scott Simpson, told The Detail that he is disappointed to hear that those who purchased tickets have not been refunded. He also says he's aware of calls for law changes from the industry in the wake of this case. However, he says there are a broad range of existing protections for consumers in New Zealand, and a consumer's rights in relation to cancelled tickets are typically set out in the terms and conditions. He encourages ticket holders seeking a refund to also submit a creditor's claim form to the liquidator. In the meantime, Chris Schultz says there is another initiative in the works, a verification system where promoters can be vetted.
Their books are opened up, their history's looked into, and they can earn like a badge or a tick. I think they're still deciding on what that's going to be. But then every Instagram post, every social media post, every poster would have this tick on it, and that would give you another layer of certainty that someone had looked into this company, right? Someone's checked them out, and someone's saying, okay, this is legit. But it is just a risky industry, right? Like, you're relying on so many things for these events to happen. I think about that Drake show often because, for that show to happen, he's got to get on a plane, right? He's got to get on a plane and come here. That's got to happen. He's got to be well enough to play those shows. The venue's got to be booked and organised and set up. From a consumer side of things, you've got to make it to that show. You've got to be not stuck in traffic or sick. If you've come down with COVID, you can't go. There's all these things that can go wrong. And I think that's why everyone's just like so obsessed with that industry, because when it goes right, it's incredible, right? You have this magic night out, but there's so many things that can make it go wrong.
The events industry today is more diverse than ever. Anyone can create a festival, and Brent Eccles says that means customers need to do their homework.
It's a kind of business where people get attracted to it who think they can make a quick buck, or, that they want to have a go at something and all of a sudden they're in too deep and all of a sudden it's gone wrong. That happens. But I think the consumer, as I said before, has to look at, do I know this promoter? Do they have a website? Do I know the ticketer? Have I used them before? Do I know the venue? And if all those things are yes, then you're probably okay. But if some things aren't, you can probably see it right from the start that it's not quite right. So a bit of homework.
That's all for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. Thank you to Brent Eccles and Chris Schultz. This episode was engineered by Jeremy Ansell and produced by Alexia Russell. I'm Davina Zimmer, ka kite anō.